Stop. Listen to me closely. The free market is a fairy tale they tell poor people so they do not riot. You have been trained to believe that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. That is a lie. One man did not just win the game of capitalism. He bought the developers and rewrote the source code. While you were taught that competition is the engine of progress, John D. Rockefeller proved that the quickest way to absolute power is to take that engine apart, piece by piece, and shoot the mechanic. He did not build a business. He built a kill switch for the entire American economy. And he used it to seize control of 90% of the nation's oil. You have been told this story 1,000 times. Little John D., the hard-working bookkeeper, the pious man who saved every penny, the genius of efficiency who lowered the price of kerosene for the working family. It is a beautiful story. It is the American dream packaged for mass consumption. Bullshit. You think billionaires get rich by making better products? You think they win because they are smarter than you or work harder than you? That is the popular delusion. The standard narrative says Rockefeller won because he was efficient. I call it holding a gun to the head of the economy. It was not superior business acumen. It was extortion. It is like winning a marathon, not by running faster than everyone else, but by paying a sniper in the bushes to shoot everyone else's kneecaps. He did not outsell his rivals. He simply ensured they could not physically exist. Imagine you were playing a survival video game. Everyone is spawning in the forest, running around with rocks, trying to chop down trees and find food. They are grinding. They are sweating. They are competing for resources. That is you. That is the independent business owner. Now, imagine there is one player who is not running around. He is sitting in a control room. He has God mode enabled. He does not need to chop trees because he owns the server. He decides where the trees spawn. He decides how fast you can walk. He decides if your inventory loads or if it crashes. While everyone else was digging in the dirt praying for a gusher, Rockefeller was looking at the map and buying the toll roads. He was not playing the game of drilling for oil. He was rewriting the code of how oil moves. He understood that the resource itself does not matter if you control the only way to move it. He was the server administrator in a game full of helpless grinders. Let's look at the anomaly that proves the glitch. The year is 1872. The place is Cleveland, Ohio. In a span of just 6 weeks, something impossible happened. It is known as the Cleveland Massacre. Rockefeller took over 22 out of 26 competing refineries. Think about that number. 22 companies, gone, absorbed. You do not buy out 22 fierce competitors in a month with a charming smile and a firm handshake. You do not convince men who have built their empires from scratch to sign them over in an afternoon just because you made a good PowerPoint presentation. This was not a merger. It was a hostile takeover before the term even existed. It was a purge. You do not get that kind of compliance without a weapon. Why does this matter to you, sitting here in 2025? Because you think Amazon is original? You think Jeff Bezos is a unique genius? Bezos is just Rockefeller with better hair. Well, barely. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, the entire tech oligarchy, they are all running Rockefeller's version 1.0 manual. They are not innovating. They are replicating the exact same code. Today, we are going to open the black box. I am going to show you exactly how the engine of absolute power is built. We are going to deconstruct the machine part by part so you can see the gears turning. Get ready. February 1872, Cleveland, Ohio. The air smells like sulfur and money. This is the industrial heart of America, the refining capital of the world. But down in the flats, the industrial district where the smoke hangs low over the river, there is panic in the streets. It is not a panic about the price of oil, it is a panic about survival. From February 17th to March 28th, exactly 6 weeks, the independent oil industry in Cleveland did not just shrink, it vanished. 26 refineries started the month pumping oil, employing thousands, fighting for market share. By the end of March, only 4 were left standing. The other 22 were gone, sold, dismantled, absorbed into the belly of the beast. That is not business. That is a purge. Bankers closed credit lines to everyone but Standard Oil. It was a coordinated execution of an entire sector. At the center of this storm sits John Davison Rockefeller. He is 32 years old. He is not yet the withered old man on the dime giving shiny coins to children. He is a young, cold, mathematical predator. He is a pious Baptist who goes to church every Sunday and believes God gave him the money. He looks at a ledger the way other men look at Playboy magazines. He is obsessed with order. To him, competition is a sin. It is messy. It is wasteful. He did not hate his competitors with passion. He viewed them as inefficient error codes in his perfect system. He believed he was doing them a favor by putting them out of their misery. He saw himself not as a conqueror, but as a savior of the industry, bringing divine order to chaotic greed. So, what is the official story? How does history explain this massacre? The textbooks love the phrase, quote, zero. They tell you that Standard Oil offered a safe harbor in a stormy market. They say Rockefeller was just better at math than everyone else, that he could refine a gallon of oil for a fraction of a cent less, and the market naturally rewarded his efficiency. The official version claims that these 22 business owners, tough men who had survived the Civil War and the brutal early days of the oil rush, all decided to retire simultaneously because they were tired of the volatility. Apparently, they just wanted to cash out. Sure, sounds plausible, right? Just a coincidence that they all folded at the exact same moment. Stop. Let's look at the calendar. How do you close a deal every 48 hours for 6 weeks straight? Have you ever bought a house? It takes months of paperwork, inspections, negotiations. Have you ever bought a business? It takes huge teams of lawyers and due diligence. Rockefeller was buying entire industrial complexes like he was picking up groceries at the corner store. He was walking into meetings and walking out with the keys in hours. Why did veteran oil men, tough bastards who built their fortunes with their bare hands, fold their cards the moment he walked in the room? Speed like that is not natural. It is supernatural. Or it is criminal. And look at the prices. Alexander Schofield, a serious man with a serious refinery. He sold for a fraction of his plant's value. He accepted 30 cents on the dollar. Why? If your business is profitable, if you are making money, you do not sell it for scrap metal prices unless the alternative is zero. You do not hand over the keys to your life's work for pennies unless someone is holding a gun to your head. What did Rockefeller show them in those private meetings? It certainly was not just a check. He showed them their future, and it looked like a graveyard. Here is the smoking gun that makes no sense: the railroads. To move oil, you needed trains. The railroads were independent giants: the Pennsylvania Railroad, the New York Central, the Erie. They made money when companies fought for shipping space. Competition is good for the transporter because it keeps freight rates high. So why were the railroads helping Rockefeller kill his own competition? Why would they help build a monopoly that would eventually control 90% of the oil and dictate terms to them? It is suicide. It is like a casino rigging the slot machines so the player wins every time. Casinos do not do that, unless the player owns the casino. Efficiency did not kill 22 companies in a month. Fear did. The official version falls apart the moment you ask these questions. Rockefeller had a secret weapon in his back pocket, a weapon so illegal even his lawyers were sweating. A document that scared grown men into submission without a single shot being fired. To understand how he held the gun, we need to leave the refinery and look at the tracks. We need to leave Cleveland and go to where the oil comes from. It was not about the oil. It was about the veins of America, the railroads. Stop looking at the refineries. They are just the victims. We need to look at the murder weapon. The real war was not fought in Cleveland. It was fought in the boardrooms of the railroad barons. To understand how a 32-year-old accountant strangled the entire free market, we have to stop focusing on the victim and start looking at the system. Forget about the Cleveland Massacre for a second. That was just the cleanup operation. The real crime started years earlier, in the mud and chaos of Pennsylvania. To understand the murder, you have to understand the weapon, and the weapon was logistics. Let's rewind the clock. 1859, Titusville, Pennsylvania. Colonel Drake drills a hole in the ground, and black gold spews out. The world changes overnight. This is the birth of the petroleum industry. Before this, people killed whales for light. Now, kerosene is the future. It is the gold rush, but dirtier. Thousands of men flood into Pennsylvania. It is chaos. It is mud, greed, gambling, and prostitution. It is the Wild West in the East. But there is a problem. Finding oil is easy. You stick a straw in the ground in Titusville, and you are rich. But oil in Titusville is useless. It needs to get to New York to be exported. It needs to get to Cleveland to be refined. The bottleneck is not finding it. It is moving it. In the beginning, it was teamsters, men with horses and wagons. They charged extortionate rates. They were thugs. If you wanted to move a barrel 5 miles, it cost more than the oil inside the barrel. The mud was so deep, horses would drown in the streets. Then, the railroads arrived. The iron horse. This is the era of the Titans. Cornelius Vanderbilt of the New York Central, Tom Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad, Jay Gould of the Erie. These men owned the infrastructure of America. They were more powerful than the president, and they were fighting a brutal war against each other. They were bleeding money fighting for volume. They needed steady shipments to fill their trains. Oil drillers were chaotic. Production fluctuated wildly. The railroads were desperate for a steady partner who could promise them guaranteed trains every single day. Now, let's shift our eyes to the map. The oil regions of Pennsylvania. Oil Creek. It is a lawless, muddy hellscape. The men here, the quote, one, think they have the power because they have the oil. They are wrong. They are unorganized gamblers. They operate on emotion. When a new well strikes, they pump until the price crashes from $10 a barrel to 10 cents a barrel. They are boom and bust cowboys. Contrast this with Rockefeller in Cleveland. He sits in a clean office. He hates the mud. He hates the gamblers. He refines the oil. He does not drill it. He views the oil regions not as partners, but as a colony, a raw resource to be exploited. He needs cheap crude, and more importantly, he needs cheap transport to get that crude to his refineries and then to New York. The drillers hate the refiners. They hate the railroads. But they are too disorganized to fight a system. They try to build pipelines, but they fail. They are sheep waiting for the slaughter. The South Improvement Company deal sounds boring. It sounds like a generic corporate entity. It is not. It is theft. It is the most sophisticated mechanism of betrayal ever designed. Let me explain this to you so you feel it. Imagine you run a pizza shop. That is your refinery. Across the street is Luigi, your competitor. He also runs a pizza shop. Both of you need to deliver your pizzas to customers in the next town. You cannot walk there. You need a delivery service. There are 3 delivery companies in town, the railroads. Normally, the delivery fee is $5 per pizza. That is the fair rate. Luigi pays $5. You pay $5. But you go to the bosses of the 3 delivery companies. You say to them, Quote 2. The delivery bosses listen. They like guaranteed volume. You say, Quote 3. This is called a rebate. It is unfair, but it is standard business. Bulk discount. But here is the kicker. Here is the South Improvement Company. You say, Quote 4. Read that again. Every time your competitor sells a product, you get paid cash. This is called a drawback. So, when Luigi works hard and sells a pizza, he loses $5 to shipping. 2 of those dollars go directly into your pocket. He is literally funding his own execution. The more he works, the richer you get. You can lower your pizza price to 0, and you will still make money from his shipping fees. Luigi cannot win. He is fighting a mathematical impossibility. That is the South Improvement Company. It is not competition. It is parasitic cannibalism. Rockefeller rigged the infrastructure so that his competitors were unknowingly working for him. Now you understand the context. Let's go back to 1872. Rockefeller walks into the meeting with Alexander Schofield in Cleveland. He is holding this contract, the South Improvement Company Charter, signed by the kings of the railroads, Vanderbilt, Scott, Gould. They have all signed it. He does not need to shout. He simply places the document on the table. He says to Schofield, Quote 5. Schofield looked at the paper and realized he was already dead. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an autopsy. He realized that the game he thought he was playing, making better oil, was irrelevant. The real game was played on the tracks, and Rockefeller had already won. This explains the Cleveland Massacre. They did not sell because of efficiency. They did not sell because they were tired. They sold because the game was rigged at the infrastructure level. Rockefeller used the system, the railroads, to crush the event, the refineries. He held the throat of the industry in his hand. But there was one problem. This deal was illegal. It was a conspiracy, and someone found out. The rebellion begins in the next chapter. Remember those 22 refinery owners in Cleveland? They didn't sell because they wanted to retire. They didn't sell because they lost their passion for oil. They sold because Rockefeller walked into the room and put a loaded gun on the table. Today, we look at the gun. We look at the specific numbers that turned the free market into a slaughterhouse. It wasn't persuasion. It was a mathematical death sentence signed in ink. Let's look at the transaction. The specific terms of the South Improvement Company Charter are breathtaking in their audacity. Here is the math of death. The standard public rate to ship a barrel of oil from Cleveland to New York was $2.56. That is what the independent competitors had to pay. Rockefeller? He negotiated a secret rate of $1.06. That is a huge advantage. But that is just a rebate. That is not the weapon. Here is the weapon. For every barrel of oil that a competitor shipped at the full price of $2.56, the railroad agreed to take $1.06 of that money and pay it directly to Rockefeller. Yes, you heard me. The railroad collected the fee from the competitor and handed 40% of it to Standard Oil. This meant Rockefeller made a profit even when his competitors worked. It is the most audacious document in American business history. Their competition was killed not by efficiency, but because Standard Oil received $1.06 for every barrel shipped by competitors, turning the logistics network into a weapon. The free market wasn't killed by better products. It was executed by a contract that said, "For every dollar my enemy spends, give me 50 cents. It is the definition of a rigged game. Rockefeller couldn't do this alone. He needed the gatekeepers. He needed the men who owned the tracks. Enter the shadow character, Tom Scott. President of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the most powerful corporation in the world at the time. Tom Scott was a kingmaker. Why did he agree to this madness? Why did he agree to pay Rockefeller for other people's shipments? Because he was desperate for order. He hated the chaos of the oil regions. He wanted guaranteed volume to keep his trains running full. He thought he was using Rockefeller to stabilize prices. He thought Rockefeller was his employee, a useful tool to bring order to the unruly oilmen. Rockefeller was the shark, but Tom Scott built the tank. The railroad kings thought they were in charge. They were wrong. They were minting their new master. By giving Rockefeller this power, they created a monster that would eventually grow big enough to eat them too. But then, the moment of realization. The secret leaked. In February 1872, the terms of the deal were exposed to the public. The oil regions in Pennsylvania exploded in riots. They burned Rockefeller in effigy. The newspapers screamed, "Conspiracy!" It was a PR disaster. Under immense pressure, the railroads backed down and canceled the South Improvement Company contract. It looked like Rockefeller had lost. But here is the genius of the devil. It didn't matter. By the time the deal was publicly canceled, he had already used the threat of it to buy Cleveland. He used a fake gun to steal the bank. By the time the police arrived, he already owned the vault. Who won? Standard Oil. Before the massacre, Rockefeller controlled about 10% of the refining market. In weeks, he controlled 25%. With Cleveland under his control, he now had the massive volume he promised the railroads anyway. He went back to Tom Scott and Vanderbilt and demanded the rebates anyway, simply because he was now too big to ignore. He turned the fake power of the contract into real volume power. The betrayal was complete. The independent market was dead. The war was over. And the modern world of monopolies was born. So, what did we learn? Alexander Schofield took his check and went home. He was rich, but he was extinct. He and the 22 Cleveland refiners didn't just lose their businesses, they lost their agency. They became wealthy spectators in an industry they helped build. Some became mid-level employees in Rockefeller's machine, stripped of their power. The idea of underscore quote underscore 8 underscore in America died in 1872. It was buried in a shallow grave in Cleveland. The independent oil man didn't just die, he was erased from the code. Who won? John D. Rockefeller won everything. The money, the power, the history books. He gains control of 90% of global oil refining. And here is the ultimate irony. Even when the government finally stepped in 40 years later in 1911 and broke up the trust, he won again. The breakup split Standard Oil into companies you know today: Exxon, Chevron, Mobil. Because he owned stock in all of them, when the companies started trading separately, his net worth tripled overnight. He became the richest man in modern history after the government punished him. The system he built was so perfect, it was unkillable. The system didn't just survive, it multiplied. Remember where we started? The survival game? I told you about the server admin and the guys grinding with rocks. The 22 refiners were the gamers. They thought if they clicked faster, if they drilled harder, if they refined better, they would win. They were playing the game on the screen. Rockefeller was the admin. The South Improvement Company was the console command. The railroads were the server architecture. He understood that you cannot beat the guy who can turn off your internet connection. While everyone else was looking at the product, the oil, he was looking at the delivery mechanism. The glitch is the feature. The game was never fair. It was never meant to be fair. There is no, quote, 9. There is only the hand on the throttle of the train. The circle is closed. This isn't ancient history. Look at Jeff Bezos. Look at Elon Musk. They read Rockefeller's diary. They don't just sell products, they build the infrastructure. Amazon owns the warehouses and the delivery trucks. Starlink owns the internet connection. The world is run by those who control the pipes, not the water. The system is stronger than the heroes. History is written by the winners, and the winners are the ones who own the server. If you're still here, listening to me talk about railroad rebates and shipping contracts, I respect that. Most people prefer the underscore quote underscore 10 underscore Disney movie. It is comfortable. It makes you feel like you have a chance if you just work hard enough. You chose the red pill. You now know how the engine actually works. Truth doesn't make you free. It makes you cynical. But at least you're not blind. Next time you hear about quote 11, check who owns the train tracks. Next time you see a billionaire, ask, what choke point does he own? Don't just watch the game, watch the server.